All right, so we'll go ahead and get going on this Wednesday morning. So today's the last official lecture where I'm teaching any new content of the semester. So we've made it all the way to lecture and exercise 129. So that's good. And here we are. Here we are at the end. So obviously there's a lot to do. There's a lot to keep up on. This is designed to be the last of the SketchUp exercises. It also feeds into your assignment 106. So you've done the elevation view. Last class, you did the section view. And then today we're going to do a perspective view. You're going to pick two of those three and turn them in on Friday by midnight, so that they're done before the weekend. And then, of course, we have our final push for that portfolio. I did get a number of emails yesterday with portfolios asking for reviews. Obviously, I'm happy to go through them. I didn't have time yesterday with my other job kind of taking precedent. So I will try to get through them today. If you want to stick around during a check-in today and go through it one-on-one, during check-ins, I'm happy to do it that way. But obviously, if you want to do it via email, that's okay too. Hila, you had a question.
Yeah, I wonder if I need to submit also a SketchUp picture to the exercise, or only the two of the three that you just talked about.
So for each of the exercises, you'll turn in something. So you'll turn in something for, what is it, 126, 128, and 129. You'll turn in something. But when it comes to the assignment that's on Friday.
Yeah, I talked about the assignment, sorry.
Okay, no, I'm just making sure I'm clear for everybody. You'll pick two of the three to turn in for your assignment. So, theoretically, if today's seems like too much work, you could just skip it altogether, and it doesn't really count toward that much for those of you that have stayed up on your exercises. If you miss one exercise, it's not going to dramatically change your grade. So if you've done the other two, you could just turn those two in and be done and just work on your portfolio. That would be fine. But it's my job to teach you this, so I'm going to be here and teach you it anyway.
I already did that. Okay,
there you go. And that's what happens at the end of the semester. You can already see the numbers of people that are here have dropped because the stress level is ratcheting up for everybody. So this is normal. This is certainly normal. Okay, so we're gonna dive into SketchUp right now. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get organized so that we can talk. Perfect. All right, so today in exercise 129, essentially what we're doing is we're working to do a perspective view. So we did the elevation view, we did the section view, and then this last one is really about the 3D perspective, where we're trying to show what the building would look like in context. Maybe there's some people in there. And it's very much the same process we've done with the last two. The difference being that instead of being a flat drawing elevation view or a flat section view, this time we're going to be three-dimensional. And really what it comes down to when we're deciding how to do this is, how does it fit into the image that we decide to use? And so before we can even really set up the view in SketchUp, we need to figure out what our image is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do an image search. So we'll do search.creativecommons.org. And I'll look for Yosemite Meadow. And the computer is being really slow. And so this is very much like I did the last time, where I'm looking for a view and I'm looking for something with reasonably good resolution. So let's say that I like this image here, for example. We can go ahead and go to Flickr and we can take a look at that image. Okay, this is a pretty good image. I could envision my building sitting kind of right in there. That would seem fairly reasonable. I think this is the one I used for the last one with the section anyway, but that would certainly work. It's also a nice high resolution, so I like that. So let's get down here to the bottom. Actually, let's see if I can escape out there. And let's go ahead and download it. So I'm going to click this little download icon and we'll download the original size. So that's great. I'm going to go ahead and leave this showing on the screen because the next piece of the puzzle is to take our SketchUp and to try to make our views match up. And this may take several tries. And it again depends on the building and whatever. So let me go ahead and I'm going to open up SketchUp right here. There it is. It's currently in my section view from before. I want to get into a perspective view. So let's go into camera and then standard views. I'll go to ISO. It just gets me back into kind of 3D. Then I'm going to go to camera and I'm going to change to perspective view. There it is. And now I want to hide those section cuts. So I'm going to go to view and I'm going to uncheck section cuts. So I get the whole building. And now the key is getting at the right kind of level. You know, where should I be in relation to it? One of the strategies that you can use if we show the large tool set. So let me go into my view and then toolbars and check the large tool set icon. There is this little person, which is position camera. It's set up to be an eye level position. So if I click on that tool and I click somewhere over in here, for example, it'll set me up kind of at an eye level perspective of my building. I can then use the mouse to kind of zoom around and kind of look at my building. And the reason that I'm picking kind of an eye level perspective like this is because chances are the image that I'm working with was shot at approximately eye level. So now I need to flip back and forth between these views and start to decide if I were to put my building right like this, would that match up with this view? Well, it looks like the horizon might be a little bit lower. So if I come back to my SketchUp, so nice when the computers are working slow. And I might drop that down just a bit like that. And then I could come back and I could take a look and you kind of glimpse that in your mind. Then you look here. Yeah, that might just work. At this point, I'm willing to give it a shot. So I'm going to go back to SketchUp. Wow, this computer's running slow today. I'm going to go into my styles. And I'm going to change, into my default styles. Right there. And I'm going to pick the hidden line style, which we've been using, this style right here. And then we'll go ahead and turn off the section cuts, the section fills, the axes, and the guides. There we go. So I have just a line drawing that's left. And then I'll go ahead and export this. I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And let's get it into a folder. I'm going to go ahead and make a folder for perspective. And I'll put it in there. And this is perspective dash lines. Perfect. And then under options, remember my width on that image that I happened to look up was about 5,000 pixels. So I could go 5,000 to 6,000 pixels. I'm going to go ahead and go at 5,000 here. There we go. I'll make sure my quality is high. Say OK. And then we'll go ahead and click on export. Now, I don't know for sure yet. Notice I didn't save the scene yet. I haven't moved it, but I didn't save the scene because I want to see that I like it first. So I'm going to jump over into Photoshop. So let me go ahead and open up Photoshop. And this will probably take a little bit. Perfect. And we can go ahead and open up. I'm going to go to File and then Open. And we'll open up that lines. There we go. And then I'm going to bring in that image. So I'll go to File and then Place Embedded. And that image was in my Downloads folder right there. I really should move this over into my flash drive as well, but we'll go ahead and click on Place and we'll drop that one in. Now, obviously, I have to make it larger. If I want it to stay in proportion, right, I don't press anything. It's doing that by default. So we'll make this a little bit bigger. Because obviously it's going to have to fill up that page like that. And now what I want to do is I want to adjust the opacity on that just a little bit. I can kind of see through it and then decide, is this perspective right? As I move it down, does my building feel like it would be in the right place? So maybe like that. That seems actually pretty close in perspective. This would be my opportunity to adjust the perspective. So if I didn't like the perspective, if I didn't like where the horizon line, that sort of thing was, I could go back to my SketchUp file and make changes, but I seem to kind of like it. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and save it as a scene. So I'll come in here to my scenes, I'll click on the plus sign, and we will find that. There it is, scene 9. I'm going to right click and say rename scene. And we will call this the fall of 2022. This is perspective. There it is. So I've done the lines version. Now it's time to go through the rest of my styles to make sure I like it. In this one, the X-ray might be beneficial. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Edit. So I'm still on the hidden line style. If I go over to Edit, and I go to the second box over here, the face settings, I can turn on X-ray mode where you can kind of see through the building a little bit. This may or may not be useful when we do the final piece together, but I'm going to go ahead and include it anyway. So let's go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And we'll call this one X-ray. And we'll go ahead and click on Export. Remember, the options have stayed the same. It's still 5,000 pixels. So we can go ahead and click on Export. And then let's go back to our styles here. I'm going to go to Sketchy Edges. I'm going to do the airbrush. You guys know I'm a fan of that. I'll go to View, and I'm going to uncheck the guides, uncheck the section fill, uncheck the section cuts, uncheck the section planes, and then there is my airbrush. So we'll go ahead and go to File, Export 2D Graphic. This would be airbrush. And then I'll come down to the pen black, if I can find it. There's the pen black. I'm going to go to View. I'm going to uncheck Guides, Section Fill, Section Cuts, and Section Planes. There we are. And I'll go ahead and export this one. I'll go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And we'll call this one the pen version. And then we'll go ahead and click on Export. Now, the next one is actually a little bit tricky. I'm going to go back to that hidden line style. So we'll go back to the default styles and we'll go to hidden line style. We can again turn off the section cuts, the section fill, the axes, and the guides. But we're going to turn on this one, the shadows. We'll turn on the shadows like that. Now, when it comes to the shadows, we need to pay some attention to what the original image looks like. So in this image, it looks like the shadows are kind of, they could be long shadows, but they're definitely coming from the left, being cast down. If we look up at this mountain, we can kind of see the angle of the shadow there. So we're definitely from high on the left coming down. So when we look at our setup here, we need to make sure that our shadows are matching. So let's open up the shadows toggle here. And what we're looking for is we're looking for the sun to be coming from that direction. And let's see if I can get it to be kind of horizontal. So that's definitely being cast more horizontal. I would love to have it, and again, this is the north side of my building, so I'm going to struggle a little bit to get the shadows quite right. See, I wouldn't want the shadows to be over here, even though I like the shadows the way they're looking. Without reversing the image, I couldn't do it because it's at the wrong time of day. So I really need to have it coming more in that direction. So let's go with it right about there. So again, I'm matching up that shadow view. So I have the time of day set and I have the time of year set. And again, I'm doing it arbitrarily because I don't know exactly when the photograph was taken or what orientation it was being turned in. But I don't want to export the lines with this. So I'm going to go to the edit menu. And on this first option here, I'm going to uncheck the edges. So I'm going to click on the button for edge settings and I'll uncheck the edges, which is giving me just the shadows. And then I can go ahead and go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And this would then be the shadow. And we'll go ahead and click on Export there, the shadow version. Perfect. So I have the shadows. We'll turn the edges back on. We can then turn the shadows off. And we're back to here. It's possible that you might want to see it with, if you have materials installed on it, or you want to use the glass or any of those examples, you could certainly export a colored version if you wanted to. So let's turn off. I'm going to go to my view again. We'll turn off the guides, the axes, the section fill, and the section cut. Like that. Again, this is optional, but we could export this one as well. Let me go to File and then Export 2D Graphic, and this is our color. And again, you're more than welcome to export any other ones that you like or want to use. Okay, so I have all of those exported. Let's go back over into Photoshop now. So we put this image kind of behind. We were relatively happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and commit to it. It'll exist there. And we could turn it off so it doesn't distract us. And then let's bring in the rest of our drawings. Let me go to File and then Place Embedded. We started with the lines. And let's go ahead and add in the rest of these. Let's add in the airbrush. We'll confirm. Go File, Place Embedded. We'll add in the color. Confirm. We'll go to File, Place Embedded. And we already have the lines. We'll add the pen. Confirm. We'll go to File, Place Embedded. Shadow, Place. Confirm. File, Place Embedded. And X-ray was my last one. And so we'll place that in place. Okay, so now it would help to go through and rename some of these layers just to clean them up a bit. So we'll call this background image. I'm going to do a layer from background. So I'll right click and say layer from background. And we will call this one lines. And then this is my airbrush. This is my color. This is my pen. This is my shadow. And this is my X-ray. And remember, I don't have to use all of these either. Then let's go ahead and change the blending mode on each. So we'll go through and add multiply blending mode to each of these. Okay, so now I have all of those layered up, but let's start by, I'm going to turn off the color because we don't need the color yet. Let's go ahead and start by bringing in that background and starting to cut that out. So I'm going to work with the background image to start. There's that background image. And we can actually turn off the rest of these layers because we don't need them. We only need the lines version. I'm going to use the lines to help me do the selection here. I will go ahead and then use the magic wand. It's hidden underneath the object selection tool. Use the magic wand on the lines layer. I'm going to go ahead and select all the way around the building here. And actually, before we do that, I want to get the rest of the background image here. So let's go ahead and go up to Image, Canvas Size. I'm going to orient to the bottom middle, and then we're going to increase the height. So let's go up to maybe 4,000 for now. Let's say okay. That way we're for sure going to get the rest of the image. That's what I was after. And then we can use the crop tool to crop it down to where we get the image. So let's crop it to where we get that image. And we can scroll down here. We can crop this up to where we get that. If we wanted to, we could adjust the sides. I don't think it's really necessary, but we could. And I'll go ahead and commit to it. There we go. Now let's go ahead and use that magic wand tool. So I'm going to use the magic wand. Oops, it would help if I actually picked it. There it is. On the lines layer, we'll select everything around my building. Plus, I'm going to add this top right up here because that wasn't part of the selection. And then on the background image layer, I'll go ahead and click on the Add Layer Mask, and that's going to cut out my building. At this point, I can also change the background layer to not be 52% opaque. We can make it 100% so we can see it against its context. So if I did this correctly at this point, it should feel about right in terms of perspective. I did notice that I forgot to include that little bit right there because this part right there is see-through. We should be able to see right through that. So I'm going to come back to my mask. And again, this is the big advantage here of using masks is I can just paint in white. Let's make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm just using the bracket key to do that. And then I can paint on the mask layer to make that part transparent. I don't have any windows because I didn't draw the windows in the back, so I don't have to cut through any of those windows right now. But we're starting to see this in its perspective. There we go. Now, the part that's not being sold yet, or what doesn't feel realistic, is where the building meets the ground. And that's because it's cut out directly on top of the ground. So I need to actually do some work to adjust that edge right along here. So I'm going to do that first by copying a little bit of ground off of this background layer. So let's go ahead and take, and I'm using the rectangular marquee tool here. I'm going to go ahead and take this whole lower section. I'm going to be on this layer. In order to copy it, I'm going to need to rasterize this smart object. So let's go ahead and actually, maybe it won't let me. Let's see. Let me try to copy it first. See if it'll do it. And then let's go edit, paste. Oh, it did copy it. So we're good. Okay. So what I have, let me try to explain this a little bit better. So what I have is I have this image that's been cut out with a mask. Then I have this image, which is on top, which is exactly the same. And this is the one that I'm going to do the grass brushing on. So let's use my lines again to cut out where the building would be. So I need to know where this bottom of the building would be. So I'm going to go ahead and use my magic wand to select outside. Oops, let me be on the lines layer. I'll select outside just like I did before. There. I'm going to add this part to it. And then I'm going to select the inverse. So I'll go to select and then inverse. And with that selection, I'm then going to turn back on layer 1 here. We'll be working on layer 1, and I'm going to actually delete this middle section. So I'll press the delete key on the keyboard, and that then cuts out that middle section right there. This whole front edge is the part that I'm concerned with. So I want to do some clone stamping along that front edge so that that covers up the front edge of my building. So I'll use my clone stamp tool with the grass brush. In order to get the grass brush, we have to go to this little gear icon in my brushes and enable the legacy brushes. And once we have the legacy brushes enabled, we can come down here to legacy brushes and we can open the default brushes. And about halfway down, we will see the grass brush. Usually I'm pretty good at getting to it. There it is. So I'm going to use the regular grass brush here. And then let me zoom in. I'm press Control plus to zoom into that lower section here. And I have to pay attention to what's happening. So we've got some grass that's in the sun, and we've got other bits of the grass that's in the shadow. So when I do this copying, I want to pay attention to where I'm copying from. I'm going to hold down the Alt key on the keyboard to copy from right there, and we'll come up here, and there's my grass brush. I think it's going to have to be a little bit smaller, so let me use my bracket key here, make it a little bit smaller, and we're going to cover that front edge right there. Now, the reason I put this on its own layer is because we can ultimately move this layer all the way up to the very top of the layer stack, so it covers everything. And then if we were to turn on the lines drawing, you can start to see how I'm hiding that. Let me go back, and I'm going to copy from right below here, and we're going to copy over in there. So I'm matching, near as I can, the shadow that's happening in here. So cruise right along like that to soften that front edge. Now, when we get to here, we've got a little bit of the lighter grass that's kind of covering the front. So I want to copy the lighter grass in the front there. And then we'll come back to some of the darker grass here, and we'll kind of cover that up. That. Got a few little issues right in there with how that was copied, so we might cover that up a little bit more. Come over here, copy a little bit more. The good news is it's not an exact science, so we can kind of work our way through here. Oops, I didn't like that tall grass stalk that's being copied. So I'm going to take my time when I copy this. So lots of, copy from, reset where I'm copying from, and moving my way along that edge. Again, the ultimate goal here is to make that edge hidden, so we don't know where that edge is, and then the building will start to feel grounded into the scene. Now we've got some lighter grass here, so let me go ahead and use my tool here. Oops. I need to copy a little bit lower here. Covering up that section there. Get a little bit more of the darker grass. I'm mixing that in. Maybe like that. And then we'll come over here. This, on this side, that's lighter. This is a little bit darker, so I'm going to need to copy some more of the darker grass. Which is going to be a harder copy. Yeah. You copy from over here. Sometimes that's the best strategy. So I'm working from this, which is a little bit larger patch of grass. And I'm copying that section over. That. A little bit more right in there. This, oops, let me Control plus, sorry. Move this over. And let's go ahead with my Option key, and we're going to copy some of this lighter grass up here, right in front of that section there. But we might need to copy a little bit more of the darker grass right in there to kind of layer it up. And then we might have to copy a little bit of the lighter grass right on top of that to kind of hide that, the butt ends of some of that grass. So sometimes it takes some layering. Okay, so if we were to look at this now, and I press Control-0 to zoom out, you can start to see that our building is starting to feel grounded in this particular scene. If we wanted to see the rest of the sky, we can turn back on that background image layer, and now you can see it in all of its context, right? So the first real step in integrating a building into a scene like this is to make it grounded in the scene. And that means we need to cover up that bottom part of the building with, in this scenario, some grass. Now, if we were doing it against a asphalt, just like we did, if you remember back to 108, when we were, actually it might have been 107, where we were collaging people into a scene, this is very much the same thing. The difference being this time we're collaging a building in rather than some people. So now that I have this in, it's time to start looking at what's happening with our shadow layer. So on the shadow layer here, I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to go ahead and rasterize this layer as well. So I'm going to right click on it and say rasterize layer. And then I have to think about what do I do with the shadows? If I were to turn off, let me turn off for just a second, everything but the shadows, so we can kind of see it there. You can see that part of the shadows is this lower section. That's all going to be grass shadows. So I'm going to need that to impact the grass. And so that's going to be important. We have shadow that's on the building. So we've got a lot of pieces of this that are working together. So I'm going to concentrate for just a second on the shadows that are down here, these darker sections of shadows. And it would be really nice if it decided to magic wand and select that for me. I'm going to drop my tolerance to 10 and see if it'll select just that. There we go. So I'm selecting just that lower section of shadow right now, because that's what I want to work with. I'm going to actually go ahead and copy it. And then I'll go ahead and paste it. And what that does is it makes the shadow its own layer right here. So I can see it as its own thing. And we'll go ahead and add it to the multiply layer. And then I'm going to drag this all the way up on top of every other layer. So now we can see the shadow affecting the grass right in here. And so we may need to do some additional work to make this shadow really work. So let's make that shadow appear to be a little bit more like grass. So let's go ahead and I'm going to turn off the grass layer here. I'm going to add a white grass along the front edge of this shadow. So let's go ahead and I'll give myself a region to copy from. So I'm just going to come up here with a big rectangular marquee, and we will paint that rectangular marquee with white. I'm ultimately going to delete this, but this is just going to help me with my copy regions here. There we go. And then let me go ahead with the clone stamp, again with the grass brush. I'll hold down Alt to copy from this white section, and I'm going to add some white to the front of this shadow. So we'll work along the front edge of that shadow. Like that. Not really much going on in there. And then we'll work our way right along here. I'm going to recopy from right there. And I'll work my way down this side. Okay, so I've done that whole front edge. That's good. Now, when it comes to the back edge, most of it's up against the building. The only part that isn't up against the building is right over here. So I guess theoretically, I should have a little bit of gray in that section. Let me press Control plus. Oops, sorry, Control plus. There we go. Let me pan. I'm just holding down spacebar. I'm going to copy from right here, this gray. And sorry, I need to move this up just a little bit more. There you go. We're going to copy from right here. And we'll add a little bit of gray along that edge. Like that. I'm going to add a little bit of gray along this edge as well. We'll add a little bit of gray there. I need to come back in with some white and touch up that edge there. There might be a little bit of white that needs to go right along in here. Then we'll have to come back with some gray to blend that out. Come back with some white at the bottom to blend that part out. So I'm working through those shadows. So now if I were to turn back on this layer 1, we can start to see the shadows being cast on the grass down here. And the edge is nicely softened. So you can start to see the shadows being cast. Now this is added, the complications are there a little bit because we've got the building that's clipping part of it. We've got existing shadows from trees. So it's a little bit harder to see. So there is some layering of it. It looks like maybe I have to run some gray shadow along the back here. I didn't see that before. So let's go ahead and come back in and let's add some gray shadow. I'll hold down Option and we'll add some back edge to the shadow. So there's lots of holding down Option to keep moving what I'm selecting, so I don't run out of copying. All right, now that I have that, let's go ahead and start turning things back on. I'm going to turn back on the main shadow layer there. We'll turn on our building. And let's take a look at what's happening here. Looks like there's a few regions that might need a little bit of help. That region right there is one of them, right, where my shadows are not quite playing out as I'd like. And I think what I'll do is I'll come back to my shadows layer right here, and I'm going to add some more darkness along that edge. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn off the shadows. And let's add some gray along that backside. So we'll turn off the lines here. And in this scenario, it might be easier to make a new region up here that has gray in it. And again, I'll have to delete that later on. Let's eyedropper this color gray so we get the same color gray. And then we'll paint that in that same color gray. So you can see as I'm working right now, a large part of my work in the perspective actually stems from how this building starts to ground into the scene. And that has to do with shadows, and it has to do with the grass. So I'm spending an awful lot of time working through the details of this grass. We go ahead and copy from this gray, and we want to copy the grass along that back edge. It looks like I'm going to have to update the front edge with some more white. So ideally you would do, oops, sorry, I did a terrible job of that. Come back to this a little bit more. Let's make sure we're working our way up there. Okay, so I've done that. Then I might have to come back to the white and cover up some of those spots that I kind of messed up on a little bit of extra. There we go. Let's go to the other side of my shadow. I might need to put a little bit across this section here, which means I'm going to have to add some white in the front. All right, almost there. All right, let me come back and copy with the white. I'm going to hold down Option to copy the white, and we're going to touch up that front edge. And the best part about shadows is they are very much, oops, I ran out of space here. They're very much arbitrary, so they don't have to be perfect, especially when they're in the grass. So we can kind of get them approximate and be happy. So let's move along right there. Cover up that front edge. All right, that seems pretty good. Let's go ahead at this point. We can turn on our layer 1 here, and we can see, oh yeah, that turned out pretty well from a shadow standpoint. Now, I need to get rid of these big squares because they're going to affect the rest of my drawing. So let me press Control-0. I'm going to use the rectangular marquee, and we'll go ahead and delete both of those colors. So now you can see down below, I just have the shadows for the grass. Now, this shadows layer right here, I really should just get rid of the shadows altogether on this layer so that they're not competing. So I'll use the magic wand on the shadow layer like this, and then we can go ahead and paint that with white. I'll just sample the background here. And then we can go ahead with the brush and we can paint all of that in because we copied it onto its own layer. I wouldn't have to, but I think separating them out sometimes makes it a little bit easier to see. Okay, so now I have this layer, which is my shadows. And then we can look and start to turn on the rest of the building here. Let's turn on the lines. I don't need the X-ray yet. We can turn on the airbrush, we can turn on the pen, and we can also turn on the background. Right, and we can start to see how those shadows are casting. Looks like maybe my shadow layer, this one, and I should really call this grass shadow. And we should call this grass cover, maybe. The grass shadow might need to be a little bit darker because you can see back here that it's actually a little bit lighter. So I may end up needing to duplicate this layer and just put 2 on top of itself. That might darken it. Maybe that darkens it too much. Maybe I need to adjust that opacity down. It will sort out exactly where it is. Right now, my whole building seems a little bit oversaturated for my liking. So it becomes a style decision. So I just spent a lot of time working on that grass in the front because I want the shadow of the building to be cast on the ground. I want to see that shadow of the building cast on the ground, and I want to make the building feel like it's grounded. Those are both really important pieces of this overall. The shadow layer, if it ends up being a little strong, remember, we can always dial that shadow layer back just a little bit. So we're feeling the shadow, but it's not overpowering. So maybe it's about like that. Okay, so now we can move on to what do we want to do about the building itself. Now, this really becomes a style decision. Because we have a photorealistic background, sometimes adding photorealistic texture on the building itself becomes too much. And we might not be trying to create a truly perfectly photorealistic rendering. In this scenario, I say the building stands out and looks a lot better because it doesn't have the texture on it. But in some cases, people may want to add the texture. I'm going to show you how to add texture on one of these walls, just so that you know. And in that scenario, I might make the background black and white so that the texture shows up in the building a little bit better. So let's say we wanted to add some texture to this wall. Well, first off, I need the texture. And so I might use some wood, I might use some concrete. For our example, I'll go ahead and use some wood. So let me go to File and then Place Embedded. I already have some wood downloaded, and I'm going to use that in the interest of time. So let me go into my files here. And if I can find it, there it is. I think it's this one. That is not it. That's not it either. Sorry, I'm guessing at these without being able to see the previews. No. Well, I'm going to get it one of these times. There it is. Okay, so what I have is I have this texture that's been brought in. I'm going to go ahead and scale it down. And what I want to think about is, in the scale of my building, how many of these boards would represent this side? Or maybe I want it to be along this edge. Okay, so I think about it and I say, okay, well, that's not enough. So let's move it down. Maybe that feels about right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and commit to this. And then I need to tile 2 together because I need to be able to get to the bottom of the building here. So at that point, I'll go ahead and select it. Again, I'm on that layer. I can press Control C and then Control V to copy and paste. That gives me a second version of it. And then I can line those 2 versions up and snap them together like that. And then they become the overall piece. So those 2, it's layer 1 in these boards. I'm going to merge those together. So I'll select them both. And then I'll go up to the layer menu and say Merge Layers. There we go. Now that's 1 layer. And now I need to make it so that it feels like it's in perspective, because right now it's not in perspective. So to do that, let's change the opacity just a bit so we can kind of see through our building like that. And then I'll use the transform. So I'll go to Edit and then Transform, and then I'll choose Skew. And I think skew is probably the easiest one. First off, I'm going to make these kind of squished. by pulling them back so that they're in line like this. And then I'm going to pull this one down so that it starts to match up with that perspective line. See the building there? So I want that to line up with the perspective. The bottom, I want to line up with the bottom of that wall. So we can see the bottom of that wall is right about there. And if I do this right, that is now texture. That texture is now appearing to be in this perspective view because I've followed that top line that's vanishing over here, and I followed the bottom line that's vanishing over to here. So I can go ahead and commit to that, and then I just need to cut it out. So let's use the lines layer, and I'll use my magic wand to select that region, which is right here. That's the only part of it that's being seen. And then I can come back up to my layer 1, and then we can go ahead and click on the add layer mask. And that's going to cut out that texture for that part of the building.
Can you please repeat how you changed the way you put the wall? You know,
Right, so that it was in perspective instead of flat.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm going to do the whole thing again. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring that in again. I'll go to File and then Place Embedded. And I'm going to bring in that texture of boards. There it is. So in this scenario, I already have the wall here. I want the piece that goes this way on the wall. So in that scenario, again, I need to shrink this down. Like this. And this time, kind of how they line up matters. So let me press Control+ a few times here so we can start to see my texture. And I want to match this up so that my boards are about the same size. So we're not quite there. A little bit bigger. So we'll say it's slightly smaller, sorry. There we go. So we'll go with that, and I'll go ahead and commit to it. Let me press Control-0 so we can zoom out. There's my first one. I'm going to go ahead and select it. So I'll use the rectangular marquee, Control-C, Control-V. That copies and pastes that image. And that's just letting me tile these two together. So we can drop them together. And that is, again, layer 2. It's these two layers right here, the boards and layer 2. So I need to select them both and then go up to layer and then merge layers. There you go. So they become one. Oop, look at that. They moved ever so slightly. Let's move that one down. Oops, right there. We don't want to have that space between it. So let me go to layer and then merge layers. Okay, so I have those two. And now we need to adjust the perspective on these. So once again, I like to do it with a little bit of opacity so I can kind of see through it. So then I'll go back to my skew. So I'll go up to Edit and then Transform and then Skew. And this is where we set the perspective. So on that last one, we followed this line. On this time, we need to follow the line that's right there. And so this is a little bit harder because it's not as dramatic, but we need to drop that down until it follows that line right there. And then when we get down to the bottom here, we need to follow that little bit of a line at the bottom. So this is going to go more like that, right about there. I'm going to use my arrow keys to move the whole thing down because I'm trying to look at the wrapping of the wood around the wall here. That looks pretty good. I might need to bring that up just a bit so that those line up. We're looking at that line. This line looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and commit to it, and then we can do the mask for that piece. So we'll go ahead on the lines layer. We'll select that piece on the end. We'll come back to layer 2, and then we'll click on the add layer mask, and that then puts the texture on that piece of the wall. So you can see how this layering takes some time and some practice to get those perspectives just right. And this is a lot of work. So and this is, you know, a good example here is doing texture mapping in Rhino and V-Ray can do this a lot faster than we can do it in Photoshop, but we can still get there in either case. And actually, which is kind of entertaining, I'm using a V-Ray material image to do this texturing. So if I wanted to do it, I'm going to do it one more time. Bear with me because I think this is important just so you guys see it one more time. This time I'll use concrete. I'm going to use concrete on this wall right here. So I go to File and then Place, Embedded. And this time I'm going to go and find my concrete. And where do I have it? That's the question. Didn't I download it in here? I thought I did. I think it's this one. Yeah, there's the concrete. Okay, let me zoom out, Control minus. Now this concrete, these are a lot bigger. So this is probably a 4x8 sheet. So I don't need so many. So we don't need to do too much scaling here. Actually, we might need to do the opposite. We might need to scale up a little bit more. All right, so maybe it's about like that. I don't need to bring in more pieces because I have this one piece. And then I will adjust that opacity again so we can kind of see through it. Okay, then I'll go up and I'll use my skew. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and then Skew. And in this one, it's a little bit harder, but I'm going to use this line here to help define where that goes. So I'll pull this one down. Might have to pull this one up a little bit so that I can start to see where that would fall. Now, this is stretching the material too much, so I'm going to pull this back to right about there. I'm going to have to match and pull this one back to right about there. Okay, so I can see that that line is matching up pretty well. The next line is harder to see because of the background, so I might actually turn off the background temporarily so we can kind of see it. I'm looking for that line right there. So we'll go back to my image and my skew. And we're going to bring this one up. And actually, we could use that line right there because it's very close to where that seam would be. Let me move this whole thing up so you can start to see that on that line. It looks like the top has been adjusted now. So we need to pull that top down a little bit more. So it kind of works both ways. We have to work both sides to get that perspective right. Still seems a little bit long to me, so I'm going to shorten that texture a little bit more. Like that. And then I might tip that down just a little bit more. And you can see where this takes a little bit of time to get it lined up quite right. This front edge is actually on a bit of an angle, so I probably should adjust that angle just a little bit there. And once I have this set, that feels right, that line feels right. I'm going to move this down just slightly, right about there. Okay, now that I like that, I'll go ahead and commit to it. And then I will use my magic wand on my lines layer to select that face right there. And I'll come back to the concrete and I'll click on the add layer mask. And that then puts the concrete in. So if I were to turn everything else back on, oops, not the color, right? We could see the concrete, we can see the wood. And so you can see that you could actually collage in all of that texture. If you were doing that, I think I would suggest making the background black and white. So I'd go up to my layer, new adjustment layer. And I go to a channel mixer. We're going to use Alana's suggestion where we check the box to use it as a clipping mask. That's perfect. We'll go ahead and say, okay. Alternatively, we could press Control-Alt-G, and then we'll check this box here for monochrome. And we can, of course, choose what background we want, what preset we want. So I think the red filter was pretty nice, right? Like that. This channel mixer here, we probably need a copy of that to put up on the grass layer here. So we could have it selected. We could right click on it and we could say duplicate. layer. Not that we couldn't do this ourselves. We can drag it up here. And again, we have to make it commit to below. So we'll go up to layer, create clipping mask, or press Control-Alt-G. And now it's applying only to the grass cover layer. That just, if you're going to go through the effort of texturing the building or adding that kind of texture, you probably want the image to be black and white so that the building stands out. It's one or the other. It's really a lot about making the building stand out. So our other option, of course, would be to put sky in for the windows. So we could do that. I'm going to use the lines layer. And again, I'm showing you all these different things because they're options that you can choose to use if you want to. So I could use the lines layer. We could select all of the windows. Actually, I should have brought in an image first. Let's go to File and then Place, Embedded. And I need a picture of sky. Did I have a picture of sky? I don't remember. Nope. Let's go to File and then Place. I know I have some on my drive here. Let's do. I'm picking this completely at random. I have no idea if it's going to be any good. Sure, we'll take that. All right, so let me make this bigger so that it's covering up. Obviously, I don't want to be seeing, I just want to be seeing the sky like that. All right, we'll commit to it. Then I'm going to use my magic wand here, and I'm going to select, oops, on the lines layer, all those windows. It's a little bit more work to select all of these because we have, we're seeing into the building a little bit here. So if I don't quite get them all in the interest of time, you guys bear with me. All right, we're close. Let me press Control Plus. Use pan here. Oh no. Forgot to hold down Shift. And so on something like that, it may be time to just go ahead and use the polygonal lasso tool where we can just go ahead and select all of this. And again, I'm just holding down the Shift key to add to selection. There we go, like that. Let me press Control-0 so we can zoom back out. And then we can add a layer mask on our sky that we brought in. And this is our sky. We can add the layer mask so that it's cut out just for the sky part of the window. And I have this left on multiply right now, I think. No? I think let's change it into multiply mode. Yeah, there we go. So we can kind of see through into the building a little bit. We're still seeing the lines, but we're seeing the sky at the same time. So again, these are all style decisions. So you could do something as simple as where you just have the background in color and you don't have any collage texture on the building. You can collage texture on the building. There's a lot of different directions that you could choose to go depending on the look and feel of what it is that you're trying to do. The last thing that I would say that is absolutely mandatory is to put a person into this scene. So I'm going to go to File and then Place Embedded. And we'll go back to those people. And we'll use the, I like the silhouette, but you could use the black and white version. right? And so let's put her all the way up on top of everything else. There we go. And then let's go into our transform. I'm going to go to free transform. And I'm going to shrink her down so that she's an appropriate height for the building itself. Right? Now I could place her into the building. I could place her on this little patio section. I could place her down in the grass. I could place her at the entry. You just want to think about where it is that you want her to go and how she would fit into the building context. So in this scenario, the grass is a lot more work to put somebody into the grass because you have to do the clone stamp on the person. So you might choose instead to put the person up on the building somewhere. But again, the key is having the person there so you have some sense of what scale is appropriate. If this view was swung a little bit, I think putting her in the entry might be nice because you can kind of see through it there. But again, it's all a matter of what you want. If I were to put her here in the middle, and I think realistically, I would probably put her right about there. Let me zoom in here. Oops, didn't mean to rotate her. Okay, so let's say she's there. I like her eye level. That seems about right for the size of this room. Yeah, all of that seems pretty good. I'll go ahead and put her right there. I'll commit to it. She appears like she's floating because there's no shadow being cast by her just yet. So that's where the shadow comes in. Let's go to File and then Place Embedded. And we have her shadow right there. We need to shrink that shadow down. So you can see how all this stuff is coming full circle. We spent a lot of time working with integrating people, and now we're in our final lecture of the semester, and lo and behold, we have to integrate people here. Right? That's approximately her shadow. Then we're going to go into, we'll commit to it, and then we'll go up to transform, edit, and then transform, and we're going to go back to skew, and we need to drop that down like the rest of the shadows. So we'll come over, and we'll go down, down, over. And in this scenario, the shadow is very skewed because it's just down on the ground here. So we probably don't even have to spend too much time getting it perfect. We just have to make sure that it's flat enough on the ground there. We'll drop it down about like that. I'm going to zoom in here just so we can see it because we want to make sure her feet are lining up with the shadow. All right, so we'll bring that over just a little bit more. I'm going to use my arrow keys on the keyboard just a bit to kind of match that up. Seems pretty good. This might need to be shortened. Yeah, right about like that. And then I'll go ahead and commit to it. So we've got the shadow. There it is. We need to switch into multiply mode. So it's being cast on the ground. There it is. And then I need to cut it because we don't need the rest of the shadow because it's only on that one little piece. So we'll come up here. I'll do a rectangular marquee. And we'll go ahead and see if it will delete it. No, it's not going to because the object is not directly editable. That means we have to rasterize it. So I'll right click on the layer and say rasterize layer. And then I can delete that little bit of shadow. Let me press Control-0. And you can see that now she's part of the scene and she's casting a shadow. So she feels like she's, attached to the building. So that would be the last piece that I would add in this scenario. So I've thrown a lot of different options at you. And this comes down to a matter of choice, what you want to see and what you don't want to see. It could be as simple if we were to turn the color back on and we were to turn off our textures here. It could be as simple as something like that. We could take it a step further. We could even eliminate the windows. This is where I needed to have of course, now I can't find the windows. There's the windows. All right, we could have it standing out like that because the building stands out more against the background. So it comes down to what's your preference, whether you like it in the black and white version with the colored backgrounds or the colored textures. You can kind of play through that. We could, of course, also tone down the background. If it ends up being too strong, we could always take the background image itself and we could drop that opacity down so that it becomes a little bit lighter. Sometimes that's a good strategy, so that you're making the building stand out just a little bit more. Okay, so I may have gone slightly long today, but we're at 9:08. Let's come back at 9:15 or so for our check-ins. Remember, we do have our last round of check-ins today. I'm sure there's a lot of problem solving that needs to happen and what have you. If you want me to review your your portfolios, I'm happy to do that by email. I'm also happy to do that in person. That's not a problem, and I will get to the ones that were emailed to me yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to let you go, but before I let you go, I have one more thing that I want to say, and that is that some of you have already asked about what's happening next semester. I'm actually taking a semester, potentially a year off of teaching, so this is going to be my last official lecture for quite a while. So I appreciate all of you. I want to thank all of you for bearing with me on Zoom and letting me do this. It's been a 15-year run, and I'm sad to be taking a break, but at the same time really happy to be have some time to do some other things that have kind of been neglected along the way. So thank you all, and I will let you go. We'll have check-ins and in another 5 minutes or so, and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot.